Everyone, it's William, and I just came in from outside, in case you're wondering, and the house isn't quite, well, I came home after being gone for several hours, and the house isn't quite warmed up yet. But anyway, I'm sure I didn't even need to offer an explanation of that. So this is the Grand Duke Dmitri 1921 diary series, and we are up to the 7th April. Our recap: in one of the two diary entries yesterday, we had an encounter with Countess Sophie Torby, the morganatic wife of Grand Duke Mikhail Mikhailovich. And actually, I forgot to mention that Dmitri had seen quite a lot of them in London in 1919 and 1920, and he just couldn't stand Mish, as he called Mikhailovich. He saw a lot of the daughters, and he considered Boy Torby, the son, that didn't sound good, did it, to be, a nice enough kid, but a bit of a pest, and kind of not knowing when he was hanging around a bit too much. But I don't remember him saying anything in particular about the wife, Sophie, Countess Torby. He might have done, and I've just forgotten it. Anyway, then he made some rather curious remarks about Nicolasha living at a hotel in Antibes rather than in his villa or his brother's villa. I can't remember which of them owned it or whether it was jointly owned. Anyway, our cast today, well, we have Slovietsky, this friend of, or acquaintance of Dmitri's, who's been there in Monte Carlo, and who Dmitri trusts apparently to the discretion of, because Slovietsky knows that he's there with Coco, and Slovietsky is apparently, at least being relatively discreet. We know that the word is out. It's already reached Lucia Marling that Dmitri has gone off to the south of France with someone. But it's not necessarily known that it's Coco. So maybe Slovietsky was keeping his mouth shut. And then we have the appearance of 3 professionals in 2 different professions. So I will preface this diary entry by saying that, to me, it moves the needle a little bit further toward the idea that the relationship with Coco was, at least at this stage, was purely platonic, that they were almost kind of buddies. And Dmitri often looked to older women for emotional support. Sometimes he also had physical relationships with older women, but he also had older women that he didn't have physical relationships with, like Linda Thomas, who became Linda Porter, the wife of Cole Porter. And he really seemed to need them for emotional support. And of course, as he got older, that age difference was starting to contract. So back when he was a teenager, it was women who were old enough to be his mother. But now that he's approaching 30, it tends to be women who are, around 10 years older than him. And I think Coco was 9 years older than him. So she fit the bill in that respect. And you'll see as we go along why this diary entry makes me feel that, it could well have been a platonic relationship. Meantime, just an alert with respect to language, and that there's some highly objectionable language in this diary entry, and in fact, so objectionable that in the transcript that they did, my Russian colleagues actually X'd it out. So, I have the actual, on microfilm, the actual diary entries, the handwritten ones, the original ones on microfilm. So I know what the word is, but they considered it apparently too inappropriate to leave in the text. So they just X'd it out so that you could see there was a word there, but they weren't using it. Okay, here we go. The management keeps reminding me very insistently. I'm sorry. Let's go back and say this is the 7th April 1921. It's a Thursday in Monte Carlo, and the place of residence for Dmitri and Coco is the Riviera Palace Hotel. Okay, the management keeps reminding me very insistently that the Riviera Palace will be closing on the 10th of April, and thus we need to get out. Initially, Coco and I had planned to leave on Friday, but waking up that day and seeing the vileness that reigned in the courtyard, we decided to postpone our departure until Saturday. The weather really was terrible. A strong wind had been blowing since morning, but I very bravely set off to play golf. But there, up high, things were, of course, even worse. It was frightfully cold, and at first it was even raining, like a Scotch mist. But then it just started snowing in thick flakes and became frightfully cold. I and my friend, the professional, stayed only 3 or 4 holes and then had to give it up. I got home around 11:30. Lower down, it was a little better, though it rained all day. Coco and I lunched in our rooms, and afterwards, despite the weather, drove to Nice because she absolutely had to go to the bank. We had tea at Orest in Monte Carlo, after which, of course, we stopped by the casino. My heart isn't made of stone. The financial turnover was carried out extremely successfully. I dined with Coco upstairs in the hotel around 8:30. Our hotel, had completely emptied out. Everyone had already left. We remained à deux. Coco went to bed very early, and I went to the casino in Monte Carlo by myself, where I played extremely successfully. But first, Slavitsky pestered me, and then there were 2... Okay, I apologize in advance if I offend anyone. This is me, not Dmitri, but I'm going to use the word. But first Slavitsky pestered me, and then there were 2 sluts whom I met up with later at the bar at the Café de Paris. They both turned out to be Russian, and we had a very good time. I got home around 1:30, a little tight. Coco laughed and laughed at me. Okay, so that word isn't even that horrible in English. Like, I don't know if, I don't think a publisher would X it out. But maybe they have stricter rules in Russian. But it's an obscenity. I don't know if the S word in English, the word that Dmitri used is an obscenity. I don't know if the S word in English is considered an obscenity or not. In Russian, it's definitely not a word I would use in mixed company, but actually I probably wouldn't use the S word in mixed company either, but I don't know if it's considered an obscenity or not. Okay, anyway, from a language perspective, this is a very interesting diary entry. It starts out with a tense shift, because he's not writing this on the 7th. But he starts out using the present tense. The management keeps reminding me that the Riviera Palace will be closing, and we need to get out. And then he uses some interesting expressions. He does switch then to the past tense. Anyway, again, the words he uses that I have translated get out. Basically, he's saying that to him, his interpretation was that the management were kicking them out, or just very emphatically, in an impolite way, saying, get out. And I really can't imagine that. So I think maybe Dmitri was just not in a good mood, and they were kind of giving him these reminders, probably in a very polite way, but he was getting fed up with the reminders. It's like, okay, I know. We have to leave. You've made that clear. So that would be my guess anyway. And I wonder, how I've always, I guess, had this maybe naive and idealized idea of what life was like for a Grand Duke, and that everybody was kind of throwing rose petals in your path. And maybe it wasn't that way, but certainly it was probably not that way after the revolution, when he was no longer in Russia. But I don't know. My assumption is that they were probably polite, but they were feeling a bit stressed out. Pretty much everybody had left. They wanted to close the place down, and yeah, anyway. So when he talks about vileness, well, he's talking about the weather. So that's not a word that typically we would use in English. You could translate it as abomination or filth or vileness, and he's not talking about, some horrible thing in the courtyard. It's just that the weather is bad. Okay, so Scotch mist, I had to look that up. It means a fog or a heavy mist with drizzle. So it's kind of raining. It's not just mist. There's kind of rain in the mist, and you're getting wet. And I wonder where Dmitri, I wonder if he had just, in fact, learned that expression from his pro that he was taking lessons from, because his pro, he has already told us, was Scottish. So maybe it's an expression that he had only just picked up from his pro. These things interest me because of my interest in linguistics and how people use language. And then he uses the expression "give it up" in English, which again he might have been what his Scottish golf pro said. Well, I think we better give it up, and he was using that expression. He might have known it before. And then when he's talking about going back to the casino, he uses the expression "сердце не камень." So, my heart isn't made of stone. And that, in both English and I'm told in Russian, is not usually the context that you would use that expression in, because it sounds like what he's saying is, I couldn't resist. Of course we went to the casino. I couldn't resist. The temptation was too great. But instead, he's saying, my heart isn't made of stone. Well, yeah, that's not the context that we would usually use that with in English. And I actually was at my friend Olga's house today, and so I ran it by her, and she also said, yeah, in Russian, that wouldn't be the context that you use that in. But, Dmitri, like everybody, has his idiosyncrasies when it comes to the way he uses language, both in his native tongue and in the other languages he knew. And he's using, twice now, he's used this unusual way of saying that he won, saying the financial turnover was, what does he say? The financial turnover, anyway, it was very much in his favor. It was very advantageous. So that's a kind of, yeah, I mean, my colleagues in Russia have mentioned how he used phrases that aren't really ordinary, that are sort of a person who's more kind of literary, interestingly enough. Okay, well, he was a big reader, so that makes sense. Okay, so here we come to, so Slavitsky is just annoying him. He's trying to focus on his gambling. We know he played baccarat. We know he played roulette. And he probably didn't want to be distracted, first by Slavitsky, and then by these two, prostitutes, I'm guessing. And, you know, the thing about the word is not so much, oh, he uses naughty words. It's more like it's very demeaning to these women. You know, no matter what they were, if they were sex workers or not, it's very demeaning. It's very unkind. So, yeah, it is what it is. But he arranges. He may not have wanted to be distracted by them just then, but he arranges to meet them later at the Café de Paris, which is where he hosted, after winning a lot of money, I think 5,000 francs gambling back in January. He hosted this big New Year's Eve dinner, Russian New Year's dinner for his friends in Monte Carlo. At that time, he wasn't hiding out from people. And in fact, if I end up using the thumbnail that I intend to use as the photograph for this video, it will be a picture. Dmitri's habit was always to have, if there was a paper menu at a restaurant where he was, and he was there with a group of people and having a good time, he would ask everybody to sign that paper menu. Kind of a cool thing to do, actually. So I couldn't fit the whole menu into the thumbnail, but so I think I'm going to use a portion of it where you can see some of the signatures. All right, and that was at the Café de Paris. And so he agrees to meet these two women at the Café de Paris later that night, and he tells us that they have, how does he put it, they have a very good time together. And he gets home not too late, around 1:30. But so, you know, it seems pretty clear. They're prostitutes. They turn out to be Russian prostitutes. And yeah, they do their thing, the three of them. And yeah, did Coco wait up for him? Does he mean when he says, I got home, I was a little drunk, a little tight, as I put it, because he uses a slang expression for drunk, a little polluted, whatever you want to say. Was she waiting up for him? Because it seems like he's not saying the next day she laughed at me. Seems like she's still up when he gets home, and maybe he barges into her room or whatever, being somewhat drunk. And she laughs, and yeah, it's not a big deal for her. At least Dmitri doesn't perceive it to have been a big deal to her. And what did she just know that he'd gone out and tied one on and gotten drunk, or did she also know about the prostitutes? I don't know. But as I said, it's another reason why it seems to me that this relationship with Coco was probably not physical. At least at this stage, it was probably platonic, and this didn't shock her. And we think about what Dmitri had said earlier, that, you know, she hasn't brought up the topic of, he says, African passions. You know, obviously not a politically correct term, harking back to the years when people looked at Africa as the dark continent full of savages. And I think the way we would say this nowadays, without any reference to Africa, God forbid, would just be animal passions. So maybe she'd heard that he liked some vigorous sex, animal passions, and she didn't even bring it up, and he was happy that she didn't bring it up. So yeah, it sounds to me like that. Yeah, they weren't inclined to have a physical relationship. So, you know, sorry I'm yammering about this so long, but it just, you know, not out of sort of lurid interest, I hope, but it seems to me that he really had this preference for prostitutes. You know, that is the only thing that the police in Paris, who were trailing him for a while, that was the only thing they put in their final report, was that, yeah, he was bringing prostitutes to his hotel, and he was going to brothels. And we only have the one instance in the diary where he talks about going to what seems to have been a brothel. And the curious thing about it is, you know, he's such a person that struggles with guilt and shame. But in this one area, I mean, if he loses a lot gambling, if he whatever. You've seen how much guilt and shame it caused him, the whole political fallout from the Berlin trip and various things like that. I mean, it was just consuming him. But when it comes to this particular thing, no. That was just sex. And it wasn't a big deal. And, you know, it makes me wonder about what actually happened in 1912, when it seems pretty clear, although there was no official announcement, that there was an informal engagement between him and the Tsar's oldest daughter, Olga. And then it was sort of abruptly broken off. And the theory has always been that possibly, I mean, people kind of have inferred from what happened that Nicholas and Alexandra had found out that he was having, that he had some kind of, to some extent, a physical relationship with Felix Yusupov. And that's always seemed absolutely absurd to me, knowing, you know, who Dmitri was. And I wonder if it was because of that. I wonder if it was because he was, you know, there are references also in the 1915 diaries to picking up prostitutes at one of the big hotels in Moscow. And I wonder if that's what Nicholas and Alexandra found out about. Because for sure that would, you know, be a huge red flag for a prospective bride, or in the case of Olga, who had been so sheltered, for the prospective bride's parents. You know, even nowadays, I think it's something that any bride-to-be or her parents would not be thrilled to find out about, and would maybe say, okay, let's slow down on our marriage plans. And then there was an incident when he was 16 with Marie of Romania, where she said that she was trying to sound him out about a possible marriage with one of her daughters, I think the eldest, but that Dmitri took it to mean that she was coming on to him and kind of pounced on her, and that before that he had told her something about his sexual desires that kind of shocked her, and she said, no, I don't want him as a son-in-law anymore. He's not the right man for my daughter. And you could interpret that to mean, oh, he revealed that you know, he was gay. But the fact that he then very quickly pounced on her, you know, kind of contradicts that was actually the case. So, you know, I don't want to go too deep into this, but maybe he liked some things that nice girls didn't want to do. That's certainly within the realm of the possible. You know, you would think, especially back then, there are certain things that are pretty commonplace now, but that back then, when, you know, young girls tended to be more sheltered, that you would go to a prostitute for. But anyway, as I say, I'm not judging him. I hope you're not judging him. It just, that's the way life is. So what do we have next time? Well, we have the last day in Monte Carlo. and no mention whatsoever of what happened the night before. No, Dmitri always refers to moral hangovers. So no mention of a moral hangover or any hangover. And it's kind of flat, the diary entry for the 8th. I'll see about maybe doing the 9th as well. But yeah, come back for the 8th. If we're on this journey together, then it's only right that we let each day unfold. If we're on this journey together with Dmitri. And that also raises an interesting question, doesn't it? Because he's made references, not in 1921, but in earlier diary entries about writing for posterity. And there are times when that seems like it's really the case. And there are other times when it seems like, no, he's probably not thinking about posterity as he's writing this. But maybe he was. Maybe he wanted the diaries to be a really frank account of who he was. So I'm not going to kick myself overly about this one and feel guilty about, not editing out any part of the text. Certainly, I'd be interested to hear from any of you about whether you think what you think the relationship with Coco was, because I'm really intrigued by that. Okay, so yeah, I will see you next time, I hope. Bye.